All right, so we are going to discuss the Mage class. First, we will begin with the art. Again, the vibrant pulp fantasy art. You have a mage here. She's got a helmet and a sword and some very fashionable boots. And then there is this kind of abyssal creature flying toward her, some sort of demonic or draconic beast that's flying toward her, and she's ready to absorb its attack into her sword, which is a mage ability, which we will see. And this goes along with the paladin art. When I do the paladin, you'll see how it matches up as a page spread the way the barbarian and the bard did, and makes for again a kind of a thematic art piece. It's all been thought out and designed in that way. So getting into the mage, this is basically a spell sword, a fighter mage, but not just half warrior, half wizard. Nothing like that, really. Doesn't have like half the warrior's abilities and half the wizards. Really, its own class. It's a magic user who channels his magic through his attacks, and very oriented toward combat, but with some very versatile non-combat abilities depending how you build them. So getting into attributes, um, the attributes, good stats are strength, agility, and intellect. So that's very unique to have that mix. Most classes don't have that. They usually balance one way or the other. So potentially very strong, very agile, and very strong mind. Constitution is anywhere from a little below average to good, and charisma ranges from bad to good. It's the least valuable of the stats from a mechanical perspective, but charisma is always, mages aren't necessarily one way or the other, but there's just a range that I tend not to emphasize that. Hit points are higher than the wizard, but much lower than warrior type classes because they have the good combat stats, but then they have this powerful magic, and that's what makes them, gives them their power. So it's a combination. It's a pretty potent combination, but lacking on the hit point, relatively speaking, to other warriors. So the mage begins with invocation and sorcery. Invocation, he possesses knowledge of the Read spell. With the Read spell is a very powerful first level spell that allows you to breathe a select weapon or more than one, depending on how you use it, in magic. So the wizard's typically just buffing that. He doesn't usually buff himself and attack with his staff or his sling. He's not very good at combat. But for the mage, it becomes much more useful, much more powerful. He can buff himself. He could buff others as well, but but he has an effective attack. So that's really the difference. It's kind of what makes him unique. And he also has certain spell power to his magic, which is a rating of how powerful his spells are. And then any weapon wielded by him becomes magical and gains +1 AT. So he always has a little attack bonus, and he can pick up anything and make it magical. It just magic can flow through him, kind of the magic of battle. And spells known, in addition to the Wreath spell, he gets anywhere from 1 to 3 first level spells, and then 1 to 2 second level spells as he progresses, which are very much more powerful. There's a big jump in power between spell levels. He doesn't ever get third. That's alone for the wizard, and the high elf priest can access third levels spells in kind of a different way, but generally that's just reserved for the wizard. But second level, very powerful, and so he can get utility. He can use other uses for his magic, but generally it's oriented toward combat. And then spell power just ranges upward as he goes. It increases his spells known and the power of his spells. And then sorcery, when the mage strikes a foe with his weapon, he may spend 1 sorcery point to cast a spell upon the foe, though at-will spell effects may be so cast without expending sorcery points. Alternatively, each sorcery point may be used as a regular spell point as the wizard. Further, the mage receives contingencies per rest, beginning with a level 1 contingency and gaining a level 2 contingency at higher percentiles. So contingencies, to summarize, are just snap of the finger. You set a condition and they go off. So the mage can just unleash a bunch of magic all at once. And it can set to any condition. So it could be when I snap my fingers, it's just kind of a free action. In response to something happening, I get attacked. This person enters the room, whatever you want it to be. An initiative, a battle starts, my magic goes off automatically, my read spell, let's say. There's a lot that can be powerful. And then also at will effects, which you can take and would likely get especially with second level spells. They give you some at will. He can just channel them, and as soon as he attacks, he can just channel them and channel him. So he's pushing out a bunch of magic. He can also have his sword wreathed, so it could have elemental or vampiric haste on it. And he's channeling a spell, and he's got his contingencies, so it's his trick. His eight's up his sleeve. And then the sorcery points can be used just as spell points to cast spells regularly. He can do that, but they're mainly used to channel magic in battle. And then his contingencies, they're actually based upon his sorcery level. So you could have a low invocation, but have very high contingencies, and you can build the class that way. A lot of sorcery points, and then these really powerful contingencies that go off. Or you can go the other way, and it generally you're gonna balance it out. Your second level contingency is big. You do have to know a second level spell, so you kind of have to balance these to some extent if you want to go that route. But it's, like I say, very, very potent in unleashing magic against enemies. And much more, like I said, combat oriented than the wizard. The wizard's kind of just the guy with the stick. If you want to play somebody with magic, but is a warrior type, is competent in combat, definitely the mage is the way to go. They can be really fun. There's a lot of different builds, and for the players who like spell swords, I think it's a really good spell sword class, a version of the spell sword. And it's a classical fantasy archetype, I believe. Mage has also actually really good proficiencies. They get absorption, arcane lore, and one other proficiency of his choice, chosen from any class, though at -1 rating. So this gives him very broad, very broad. You can take the enthrall from the Grey Elf Necromancer. You can take survival. You can take devices from the thief. There's all kinds. You can build, just the idea of it's just a much broader, and it gives a lot of variety and versatility to the class. Cool concept. Absorption is only unique to the mage. When the mage is targeted by a hostile magical effect, he rolls absorption to lessen the damage of the effect by the result of the check, using a d20 instead of a d10. This is one of those few checks that have proficiencies that use a d20. After so doing, his weapon becomes charged with the magic of the absorbed attack, gaining it as a damage bonus to be added to the result of his next successful strike. All absorbed damage is cumulative up to the absorption percentile and lasts until unleashed or until the end of battle. So you can just charge up your weapon. It's a defensive, so it's you're absorbing damage. It's not, you're not taking the damage. It's also giving you an offense to turn on your enemies. Can be really powerful. It does dissipate at the end of battle, and then generally I rule for it to be applied to the next successful strike. You kind of have to channel it. The GM wants to allow you to pick which strike that's kind of a little bit debatable with that ability, whether you can contain it in the weapon or whether it's just going to unleash. That's kind of a little debate that I've had with the design element, but for now, when you attack with it, it does go off. So at least at the present state, at the end of the beta, I'm sure I'll decide that eventually, the final ruling on that. Arcane lore, the mage can identify and manipulate magical writings, items, and effects, as well as otherworldly and magical creatures. So again, arcane lore is not just knowledge of magic that anybody would have. It's specialized arcane knowledge, ability to interact with magical items, magical glyphs, magical traps, know magical creatures, make checks to understand what their qualities are, what they're, this unique to the mage, not unique to the mage, but unique to someone with arcane lore, which the wizard, the mage, generally have it. A few other classes have kind of little variations of it or can access it in different ways. But it also allows him to attempt to activate scrolls, wands, and staves. So the wizard, he's the only one that can just activate them without any fear of backfiring. For certain classes with certain, like arcane lore lets you do it. Devices from the thief can attempt to activate these things, but if they backfire, they do disintegration damage, which can be a disaster. But it is something that you have as the mage available to you. And then you also have your other proficiency you pick. So actually pretty potent on the proficiency end. Belongings, pretty standard. A weapon, another piece of like a weapon, buckler, shield, armor of some sort, light or medium, and some silver. They gain hit points equal to their level, as do most classes. So 2 at second level, 3 additional hit point bases, 2 hit point base, 4, 5, 6, all the way up. And so they have a slower progression. Most classes only get their level. The barbarian gets twice his level as the centaur knight and the hill dwarf scoundrel. But otherwise, like I say, on the lower end for hit points. But again, all the powerful magic compensates for that. And then his attributes, plus d6 plus 4 to intellect, d6 plus 4 to anything other than intellect, d6 plus 4 to the attribute of your choice. So it's always going to be, usually, it's going to be your main stat, anything but your main stat, and then anything. So you can kind of build it up as you wish. Same rules for reaching 100 for all classes. Features, when Invocation reaches 100, you get 24 hit point base. So it's a huge hit point boost for a class with not as many hit points. And again, this is just kind of like your invoking of magic has given you just a powerful permanent ward to defend yourself with. Sorcery gives you a little hit point base and also extra sorcery points. You go up above the 5 to 7, and you get 8 extra to your hit point base, which again, for a class with low hit points is a really solid amount. And then the Mage, his proficiencies, most proficiencies, they rolled with D10, so they become D12s. But absorption, when it reaches 100, because you're already rolling a d20, it just doubles the effect. So again, if you got maxed out, it's d20 plus 5. I mean, you can roll, just say you could absorb 50 damage in one hit into your sword and unleash it. So it's against magic enemies, they have powerful defense and offense, and pretty fun concept. People who've played him have generally enjoyed him, especially if you like the spell sword concept. It's pretty pretty good if you don't want to be just the traditional wizard with the the guy with the hat and the staff, and just combat oriented kind of caster can be quite enjoyable. And that will do it for the Mage.